Right, let us bring in our next guest. Let us do it. Here she is. Sacha Wall from iStream Radio, music promoter and broadcaster. How are you, Sacha?
I'm good, thank you, Sonia. Good morning. How you doing?
Really good, thank you. I'm so glad you joined us. I received a letter. Here it is. Hello, Sonia. I love your deep dives. Have you ever looked at the Rettendon murders, aka the Essex murders? Something was very wrong there. I never quite worked out how Leah Betts fitted into it all. Do you know? And was Brian Harvey kicked out of E17 to do with Leah Betts? Any clarity on this would be appreciated. Love, Jen. There's a lot of questions there, Jen. But the moment I read this, I was like, there's one person I can get on to answer this, because she was there. She was literally, at the scene. That's the reality. Sacha, talk to us. A lot of this revolved around Raquel's, which actually became the in place to be in the 90s. What was Raquel's?
Well, it's quite interesting, actually, you say that. So, yeah, how I came into this is because I was a barmaid at Raquel's. So I was a barmaid at Raquel's in 1995. At that point, I was 21, Essex girl. I was working in the city as a reinsurance broker. And on a Friday night, I was working at Raquel's. And that was because I had been raving since 1994. So at the weekends, that's what I was doing. And to take everybody back to that era. So 1995 was my favorite year.
Was it? Interesting. Okay.
Interesting. Yeah. So I look back at it as my most fun year ever. I was 21 years old. The music, and I know obviously you with your music journalism. So the music at the time was Britpop, boy bands, and house music.
You're right.
And being 21 at that time and the explosion, and it was a really, really, really great time for music. And it was where my real passion for music started. And Raquel's was actually my first job in Clubland. And I carried on in Clubland, even though I did some other things. That's been my main job, my role for the last 30 years has been with DJs, Clubland, parties, all of that kind of thing. So 1995 was a great year, and we were having loads of fun for us. Obviously, there's loads of things going on in politics and blah, blah, blah. But as a 21-year-old, you're really not aware of.
You were living the life. You're at the center of this picture. You look proper happy, right? Like you're having a proper full-on good time, right? Which was great. You were free of like burdens of adulthood and everything. You were at the center of a very hot and cool rave scene as well. So all of those things were really fantastic, right? Really exciting to be around there.
Yeah, it was. I left home when I was 16.
Wow.
So this was 5 years later. And I'd actually just bought my first house. So I bought my first house, which is an end of terrace house on the second worst housing estate in Basildon.
Bless you. But still buying your own house, girl, at that age, that was phenomenal. That said quite a lot about your stockbroker acumen, I should imagine.
Reinsurance broker. Yeah, well, actually, it was this. I come from an estate agent family. My real name is Ellen Pyle. And so if anybody looks at my YouTube and my TikTok that's relating to this particular case, they will see me as Ellen Pyle because that is my real name. Sacha is my modelling name because I became a page tree model in 1998. So a couple of years after this, I became a page tree model. And actually changed my name because as soon as my name was put in the sport, I started getting loads of dodgy phone calls.
God, I'm sure you did, love. Somebody said, yeah, that was a great era if you were cute. Well, Sacha was particularly cute, actually. Obviously, we've seen that. So let me just give a little bit of background information on this. You say 1995 was one of your favorite years. Well, I don't think that could be said for the three men who obviously ended up in body bags. And so the Rettendon murders, as it became known, also known as the Range Rover murders, the Essex Boy murders, it occurred on 6th of December, 1995 in the village of Rettendon in Essex. That is like the stuff of legends and myths, right? We've seen the Rise of the Foot Soldier. The series goes on and on Amazon Prime. They have so many Rise of the Foot Soldiers. It's unbelievable. But that was a whole scene going
The
on there.
next one is Rise of the Foot Soldier goes to Ibiza. And I have to say, and I know there's a lot of people out there that feel the same as me, I wish Rise of the Foot Soldier would go to Outer Mongolia, to be fair.
Right.
Because it is a shocking travesty on the death of 3 guys that has been used by the media as a full sensationalist cash cow manipulation.
Wow.
And for whatever anybody thinks about it, because there is such a lot of confusion,
Yeah.
and there's such a lot of nonsense been put out, and such a lot of sensationalism, that so many people, like your viewer that wrote in, are very confused as to what the hell actually has gone on, why everybody's still talking about it, why everybody still cares, and what's gone wrong here.
Right. And you're here to add some clarity to that. So these are the 3 men that we're talking about. This is Tony Tucker, right? Patrick Pat Tate and Craig Rolfe, right? Is that the 3 men we're talking about here? And they were very much part of the drug scene, right? Were they like kingpins?
So I would say a lot of guys wanted to be them.
Right.
Tony Tucker was living, and my dad actually sold him his house before he died and sold his house after he died.
Wow.
And that's where that estate agent family came in. So Tony Tucker was the leader of the 3 of them. At the end of the day, there were 3 lads. Now, they were talked about as 3 Essex boys. But when they died, Tony and Pat were in their mid-30s. And Craig was 26, I believe. So Craig was the younger one. There are some really interesting facts about these guys. Craig was actually born in Holloway.
Prison?
Yeah.
Okay. Interesting. Didn't know that.
That was due to his mother going to prison for the death of his father. And she spent 18 months in there, but somehow got out because actually her boyfriend bludgeoned his father to death.
Jeez. So he came from a family of violence anyway. It's not a regular thing to be born in prison, obviously, certainly not Holloway.
There was some serious mummy issues, put it like that.
Yeah, I hear that. So obviously that the story that we've heard is that these were 3 leading drug dealers supplying nightclubs around Essex, including Raquel's, where you worked at, right? They were murdered on a small farm track, and the murders obviously were the subject of a major police investigation, multiple TV programs about it, multiple, and the operation was Operation Century, that it was all underneath. So I want to introduce something else now. How was Leah Betts' name associated with this murder? Sacha, talk to us.
So these 3 guys were drug dealers in Essex, and they were shifting an awful lot of ecstasy, cocaine, and cannabis, basically. Now, what we have to understand is that the link that was talked about is ecstasy here. And ecstasy was being demonized heavily since the 1994 Criminal Justice Bill to stop raves. So we were 5 or 6 years down the line of serious revolution, explosion in acid house, and ecstasy being the drug of choice and the thing that everybody was doing. And when I say everybody was doing it, everybody, as far as I'm concerned.
Yeah, you couldn't go clubbing in the 90s without people being absolutely bombed out on it. And for those overseas who are unfamiliar with this story, Leah Betts was an 18-year-old girl who actually died after taking an ecstasy tablet in November 1995. And it was believed that Tucker was ultimately responsible for supplying. Do you think that's accurate?
No, so it isn't accurate at all. So I did the same pill from the same hound on the same night as Leah.
Oh, did you? Goodness. Mm-hmm. Right. Okay.
Correct. And so actually, so the ecstasy in question is called apples, and part of the manipulation and the confusion in the public is that Leah Betts died from taking 1 tablet of ecstasy. which is completely incorrect.
Right. That is the story. That's the official story. You're going to crash it open.
So actually at inquest, it said that she died from suffocation of water intoxication.
Okay.
So what it actually was, in inquest said that her brain drowned and her internal organs drowned from drinking too much water. That was what was said at inquest. Now, they said at inquest that she drank 9 litres of water in the space of 20 minutes.
Wow.
Now, that is not humanly possible.
Let's put this comment up. This is going to trigger you. I mean, in a good way, because the reason I brought Sacha on is because I knew she was there. I knew she understood what was going on. And like any of our guests, I like to have a good insight on something. Reba says, I remember our school called an assembly showing photos on a big screen of Leah Betts and telling us all, you will die if you take even one pill. It was that big. Yeah. People, I cannot underestimate how big the death of Leah Betts was.
So can I ask Reba, was Paul Betts at your school when you were shown that video? Or was it just the video? Because
is that Leah's dad?
Right. So Leah Betts' father was a ex-Met police officer. And his wife was her stepmother. And that was who was with her at the time. Her stepmother was a nurse and also somebody that was already campaigning against drugs before she died. Now, she was the stepmother because Leah Betts' mother, Paul Betts' first wife, had died 3 years ago at the age of 46 and suddenly dropped down dead at 46. So Leah Betts was a 17-year-old and she used to come to Raquel's. And the thing about Raquel's is the average age in Raquel's was 16, 15. Wow. And it was incredibly groomy. Right. And so this whole story is, it is very heavily manipulated because the story of what happened to Leah was, in my humble opinion, specifically orchestrated to demonize ecstasy because this was part of a predetermined plan.
Wow.
And also the Essex Boys murders was to demonize ecstasy. The major link in everything is Murdoch's media.
Okay. And some people are saying this, some people are saying the scum in the comments, right? But so Murdoch's media was pushing this because why? Now, here's the thing. To be clear to everybody out there, anybody, do not report me to the police. What I'm about to say is not like promoted. I go through this all the time, Sacha. It's absolutely ridiculous.
I'm in the rave scene and I've always been in the rave scene. It's always been associated with drugs. People not talking about drugs does not help.
No, it doesn't. It doesn't. And the thing is,
anywhere.
Here's the thing is that I took ecstasy once, right? And I'm already a tactile loving person, right? But what it did is it created it with bells on. So it was never hateful. It was never about people warring at all. It was about bringing people together. It was very much considered to be a love drug, right?
It is a love drug.
Right.
And that is the truth.
Do you think, is that why the demonization happened?
The demonization happened because the alcohol companies were losing millions and millions of pounds every weekend. Every weekend.
Nobody was drinking.
So nobody was drinking. They were even turning the taps off so people would buy bottles of water.
You're right.
Because nobody was touching alcohol. We didn't touch alcohol. Up until that point, up until 1994, I'd been a pisshead since the age of 14. I'd always been around alcohol. My parents drank alcohol. I'd grown up in pubs. I'd been drinking pretty heavily. And by the time I was 21, I was a pissed up Essex girl. I generally was. And I actually, this is not me advocating drugs, the rave scene, the ecstasy scene, the whole culture saved me from that.
Wow.
It actually did. We went out and did one pill, raved all night and had an amazing time.
Remember this, when Grange Hill also promoted it, again for our overseas viewers, Grange Hill was a leading BBC children's drama. They had a song, didn't they?
Just Say No, yeah.
So, right.
And so the Just Say No campaign, and this is why it is incredible. There was 30 people at Leah Betts' party, and she did not die from taking ecstasy. In my humble opinion, there was another drug given to her, and what was described as happened to her sounds like a completely different drug. And it was 4 hours after she took this pill, and we all took this pill. It was an apple. And there's an awful lot has been talked about these pills because they were pure. And when I mean pure, they were strong. Right? You talked about the love. They were more love than you could possibly imagine.
Right.
So they were the highest high. They were amazing. You didn't need more than one. It was all good. Once you'd done one of those, everybody would know it. So don't tell me that Paul Betts and his wife were not realizing that absolutely everybody, the 30 kids at their party, at this 18th birthday party that happened on, for everybody that likes a bit of symbolism, the 11th of the 11th, 1995.
Interesting. Very interesting. So let me just get a chronology here, right? On the 11th of the 11th, 1995, Leah Betts was said to have took this and then died. And then...
So this is... Let me hold, and this is to get it. So
no, but what you're saying is obviously at the inquest it was about that she
didn't die like that, though. And that's the key thing as well, getting these facts straight. So her birthday was 2 weeks before. Her dad decided to hold a party for her on the 11th of the 11th. She went into a coma at midnight that night. Then the police arrived. She was then taken to Broomfield Chelmsford Hospital. And then she was there for 4 days before she died.
Right.
She was in a coma for 4 days. Now, this is when it hit everybody, it was hitting the press.
Yeah.
Raquel's was still open. And so what actually happened, because we weren't online in those days, so it wasn't like us 21-year-olds were buying the paper and all of this kind of thing. So,
right.
So it's just suddenly going out that it's all got really on top because this girl's in hospital because she's taken a pill.
Right.
That's all we're all knowing.
Right. Got you.
We turn up to Raquel's for work on Friday night, and the whole world's press is there. Wow. And I mean the whole world's press. Wow. Like Basildon Market Square, and you've got all of the trailers up the road, and it is literally like
it was everywhere, mate. Everywhere. So why do you hold Murdoch's press more responsible than other media?
Because before she was even dead, 24 hours, like literally 12 hours, when she's just in the hospital, they started taking pictures of her in her hospital bed, put it out and said, we're going to find the killer, the dealers that have supplied this killer A. The dealers that have, and we're on the hunt. So immediately, she's not even gone. And immediately there's this big sensational,
I got you. Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
Right? So then we get to Raquel's on Friday night and they're handing out pictures of Leah in a coma at the door. Right? And it was incredibly shocking for us at the time. And obviously we had all been having a great time. Right? Raquel's wasn't how it was like Raquel's was the great scene and oh my god it was amazing. No, it wasn't. It was the worst. It was the only club in Basildon that was on a Friday night doing house music, and it was always really rough club. It wasn't a great club, and the door staff and the people running it, and Bernie King, i.e. Bernard O'Mahony, was the doorman at Raquel's. And it was a right rough hole, actually.
Was
it? It was not the club it wasn't Hollywood's in Romford, and it wasn't Adlib in Southend.
Got you.
I only went there on a Friday because I was working in Basildon. It was easy money, and it was by the same promoters as the night that I was going to, which is called Perfect Virtue in Southend.
Right.
So So what actually happened then? That was the end, right? So racket, that was the end. We went in. There was nobody in the club apart from a couple of old Bill, but no police spoke to any of us.
Wow.
None.
That's really, it is fascinating. So just to go back to that chronology, and I completely take your point because it's important to get these facts straight. And I do really appreciate you joining us to do that because it is so important. But the chronology is she died in November 1995. Then the Rettendon murders followed, and people said that they, right, yeah, 2 weeks later, was it? Right, yes, because in December 1995. And then I want to introduce the third part of this story. And then after that, Brian Harvey, who was a member of E17, came out and made some comments about ecstasy. Is that correct?
So that was quite a long time afterwards, because actually, 1994 to 95 was E17, Stay Another Day was at Christmas number 1. Right, so the start of 95, before all of this has happened, E17, Christmas number 1, everybody's in love with Brian Harvey. As I said, it was boy band era, Take That, everything. They were put up and we were all in love, and he's a brilliant artist and an amazing talent and got the voice of an angel. Anyway, so it's actually not until 1997
2 years afterwards, he said his
Brian
comments.
made those comments. Yeah. And that's when he got kicked out. And also what I'm portraying here, as you can see, is what was actually happening was a one big, huge demonization of ecstasy, using different people, using Brian, using Leah Betts, using the Essex Boys. Obviously, the Essex Boys were dealing a hell of a lot. So taking them out of the game, yeah, somebody just takes their patch, there's still same amount of dealing going on. It doesn't stop ecstasy being dealt. Nobody stopped doing ecstasy. But Paul Betts, the
father of Leah,
spent the next, he's dead now, only recently, but spent the next 30 or 28 years being the campaigner for ecstasy. So if anything happened around ecstasy, he was always asked for a comment. And he then went in, spent his next 20 years going into schools, scaring children, saying that 1A might kill you. And it doesn't, and it's not true. And meanwhile, the alcohol industry and the Red Bull industry, so Red Bull then did the Sorted campaign, which was, we're going to give you £1 million to put Leah Betts on posters saying Sorted on billboards all around. And anybody that knows this story knows the Sorted campaign, because it's the same as this Just Say No Grange Hill campaign. So this is the Sorted by Red Bull, and then into clubs goes vodka and Red Bull.
And see, this is extraordinary, the timeline you're painting here. And I think Crafty Kim has a point. I don't know if you can see it on the screen. I think that case was the demise of the rave scene, coupled with the demonization of the traveler's lifestyle. Does that resonate with you?
It did an awful lot of damage. Yeah, it really tried to. I mean, the rave, what it really did was make the rave scene go overground, which really didn't help the rave scene. Because it did an awful lot of damage, because actually there was no real, obviously on the high level dealing side, and this whole thing has been talked about ecstasy, but why is nobody talking about coke?
Right. Okay, got you. Because here's the thing. Hope says, and I take her point, to be honest, I don't see the problem with a father trying to stop kids taking drugs. And I take that point, right? And surely you do as well, right?
So I 100% believe in drug education, right? It's the Just Say No does not work.
Right. Just say no.
It's a really pointless exercise. Like, if you ever turn around to a teenager and go, just no, don't do it, don't try it, they're going to go and try it. It's, just saying don't do drugs, kids, really, like that, we really are past that. Like, alcohol is a drug. Cannabis has been given out by the NHS for anxiety. If you go over to the US, there is so much more understanding of what's medicine, what's drugs, and what's abuse.
So Amy says, so what is she saying? That ecstasy is good for you? I don't think that's really what you're saying, are you?
In small doses,
Careful. You do not want the police on your case, sweetheart. Trust me.
I'm not. I think if people open their eyes to I would say that cocaine is an extremely dangerous drug. Ecstasy, they are pushing in the States for it to be classified for medicinal use in small doses. I'm not talking about go out and do loads of ecstasy and get trolleyed and do cocktails of alcohol and this and that. I'm not saying any of that, but I cannot sit here in honest truth, which I always am in honest truth, and say that it's bad for you, because in small doses, it was actually invented for marriage counselling.
Right. And also people are pointing out the fact that it is used medicinally. In fact, Sully says ecstasy is being used in therapy now for PTSD. So the demonization still exists to today, because even I have concerns. I'm trying to make sure that none of us get in trouble. That's how deep rooted it is though, Sacha, right?
Yeah.
That's
and because it's 30 years of media manipulation.
Yeah.
And, you know, my last YouTube, so my dad died a couple of months ago, and I got the call, and I was doing a YouTube on ecstasy versus alcohol, and it was just gone up at that time, and that was the last time I've been on YouTube. So I'm literally on a hidden retreat at the moment, and I've just popped out of my retreat to do this.
Bless you. Thank you.
That was the last time I was online, but no, it's fine, and it is really, really good to talk about it, because I am very, very, very passionate about it, and have been wanting to talk about what happened with Leah and the real truth of it and the understanding of it, because what happened is alcohol is promoted. This drug that a little bit, have a bit of fun, you're never going to kill anybody, you're never going to hurt anybody, and you're not going to stab anybody, and you're not going to have a fight. Whereas we live in a world where alcohol is promoted so heavily. It is glorified to the absolute max. It goes with the white, and that makes the biggest amount of money on the street, and that's where some of the worst kind of dealing and the amount of money is being shifted around. They go together like peas and carrots, unfortunately. And alcohol is so heavily promoted and
taxed, as Marcuson points out. I mean, we are also talking not just about kind of like the demonization of it, but about all the finances, right, in the background. They can't tax stuff that's right.
Follow the money. I always say follow the money. Yeah. And you do, and I know you do. And that's where it is, you know. And I do, while I'm talking about this, and I have to make sure I get this out. So there's an incredible miscarriage of justice that has gone on around this case, not just in the truth of what happened to Leah, not just in how they've used it to demonize ecstasy and rave culture and all of these different things, but on the fact that the actual perpetrators have never been. In my opinion, the actual perpetrators have never actually
of the murders. Two men were convicted, right? Jack Womes, wasn't it, and Michael John Steele. So they were convicted, right, of the murders on the 20th of January 1998. I remember the Old Bailey trial. But so you're saying something's wrong with that conviction?
Yes, and anybody that is following this case, most people, 99% of people that have looked heavily into this case and know an awful lot about it, do not believe that Jack Holmes or Michael Steele were involved in the actual pulling of the trigger or the death, and that they were scapegoated. Jack Holmes is now out. Michael Steele is still in category, whatever it is, hard category 4, whatever it is, hardcore prison. He's 81 years old. They both of them have always claimed their innocence. They would have been let out, as always. If they had said we did it, they would have been let out a long time ago, but they never have. They've always claimed their innocence. Michael Steele is a hardcore guy, and you know, it's not that they were innocent. They were involved in drug dealing. They've got bitten. But I do believe they were scapegoated, and Michael Steele did get his parole finally, and everybody was like, yes, his parole was cleared and he was supposed to be released, and then it has just been blocked by the secretary, justice secretary. At the
I
last
didn't
stage.
realise. I beg your pardon, but I didn't realise there was so much controversy around the conviction. There's loads of people in the comments saying those men are innocent, when they were 100% innocent. I didn't realise there was a controversy around the conviction.
Yeah, massive, huge. And the reason you don't is because the press, which we know is controlled, has tried to keep that side down.
Right.
You know, there is press about it if you search, but you know what it's like with the algorithm. They really tried to keep what they Rise of the Foot Soldier, you know, that's top of Netflix and everybody want to see that bullshit.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
the actual miscarriage of justice is the fact that these boys didn't get shot by those two guys. The families have all suffered. Everybody suffered. The families of these boys have suffered. You know, it's not that people are innocent, but all of the injustice has happened, and the actual perpetrators and the people that are involved generally are the ones that are still making the cash out of it and are still on the street and active.
Right. I think it's so important to get this insight, right? Because you've actually changed my mind during this conversation, right? And I think that's what's important. The truth does that, doesn't it? It's like if you're able to hear new information and it computes and makes sense. I knew that there was a problem. I knew it'd become an industry, like you say, at the top of Netflix, Rise of the Foot Soldiers, blah blah blah. And again, we're not here glorifying drug dealers or gangsters or anything like that, but the truth is important, right? And if innocent people are serving time, there's something wrong there.
Yeah, there is, as always with these situations, the Essex police corruption and MEPO. It's police corruption that's involved in this case, and it is why there is so much injustice. It is well known. There's such a lot of sensation. There's policemen that were sleeping with the Essex Boys' girlfriends. It is so dark. So
wow.
There's a lot of top Masonic involvements. It is, you know, these three guys were drug dealers. They were Essex Wide Boys. They were by far the only gangsters and by far the only drug dealers. You know, they have been used. Their death has been used, of course. You know, they got shot dead, point blank range in the face.
Oh, that's terrible.
That doesn't glorify drug dealing, and none of it does glorify drug dealing. You know, I am actually an advocate for legalization of many things, and it to be, you know, controlled in the right way and educated in the right way, because none of the rest works, you know. So
no, exactly. We have to find a solution. It's like when my last guest, and we're talking about the Middle East, and it's like we just keep doing the same thing over and over and over again, and we can't allow them. Who was it who said, you know, the definition of madness is when you do the same thing over again and you expect a different result, right? Right. Exactly. And that's what's happening here, isn't it? Absolutely what's happening here. And the thing is, because they've solidified that narrative so much, and I see now, and Jen, I hope it now makes sense to you, that kind of like how it went from the three murdered men to Leah Betts to Brian Harvey, and the big and obviously Sacha is going to correct me if I'm wrong, because she's that kind of woman, which is great. But so what I understand, Sacha, the theme that joins all three of them was the demonization of the rave scene, the demonization of the drug, all of those different things all coming together. That's the running theme, right?
And the phone hacking scandal.
And right, got you. And I think that's probably a part 2 conversation, actually. I think that's worthy of part 2 conversation. Let's organise that. Let's get that organised.
On my YouTube, if you go to Sacha I Stream on my YouTube, I've got a playlist which has got all about this case. So everything that I've spoken about, because basically I got brought back in. I hadn't thought about it for years. And then Sky One did a Essex Murders documentary. And so I got called to do that. And that came out at the start of last year. But interestingly enough, and this is for part 2, I did 2 days of filming, which they cut the whole lot apart from 1 minute. And the only minute they did put in, they got me to say something specific on WhatsApp and then just dub that over it. It was very dodgy. But we'll talk about that later. So that's how I've been brought back in. So so much has happened over the last couple of years, because like with all of these cases, when people have got truth and light and come in and want to talk about truth and light, the people that don't want that start to shut it down. And,
exactly.
And there's a lot of gangsters involved, and a lot of gangsters I know and people, and a lot of people have come in with that kind of, she's just a barmaid, what does she know? She's just a blonde whore, she's just trying to make money, la 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 la.
Yes, it's rubbish. I mean, all of that is this is when, like I say, the moment I read Jen's email, I was like, Sacha knows this stuff, and she knows it a lot better and in more depth and detail than I do. And so that's why I brought you on, because I like to bring on people who are experts, and you are. But yeah, let's do that part 2. I really appreciate I think you've blown a few minds this morning, by the way. It'll take a little while for the dust to settle. Because
sorry everyone, I hope it's all right for Monday morning.
All of that is great. It's great, because I think we're in an era where we need to shake up, right? We definitely need to shake up. And this is one of those stories that, and it's quite interesting. Today has been quite a lot about, I'm looking back and reflecting on what's gone on in the 90s. I also started with the Stephen Lawrence story. So it's almost like, I wonder if there's something going on in the heavens where it's bringing it all back round again for us to deal with it properly. You know what I mean?
100%. I call it the 3-year itch, or the magic number is 3. So the magic number is 3, and it was 30 years. So everything is circular and cycler. So when there's injustices and truths that haven't come to light, by the time it gets to that 30 years, the universe is going, no, it's got to
I love that. That is a fantastic note to end on. Thank you so much, everybody. This is Sacha Watt. I will make sure to put a link to her YouTube in the description at the end of this stream. Please go check out. She's done loads of reports on this. Sacha, you've been an absolute star this morning. Thank you so much, everybody. Sacha Watt, take good care of yourself. Lovely. Brilliant.
It's time to wake up with Sonia Poulton.